look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Into our show today, we have a very special guest on our show. He's one of the founding fathers of the hemp movement and has been hailed by High Times magazine as the patron saint of the cannabis movement. He's author of the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which has been considered the Bible of the hemp movement, and he's been one of the most hardest working activists in the past 17 years, doing everything he can to make this wonderful plant legal. Jack Hare. Jack, welcome to my show.
Thanks, guys. How you doing?
Fine, thank you for coming.
Okay.
Can you tell me how you first began getting involved in the hemp movement and what it was that got you all excited about it and where you're from?
Well, it kind of happened in two stages. In 1969, I was 30 years old, and this young lady turned me on to some pot because she thought I was very square. And she thought I never had any real feelings, and I told her, of course, I felt everything that nobody could feel more than I could feel. But she insisted, and because I liked her, I kept trying it. Nothing happened the first 2 or 3 times, and one day she came home with some Acapulco Gold, and she said, I want you to keep smoking these. And I got very stoned, and she put earphones on me, and I heard music in color, and I said, wow, this is the best I've ever felt in my life, and it's illegal. So, you know, that's how I kind of got involved. And a couple of years later, a friend of mine over a little party had told me we had written on the back of a paper bag a 1 to 10 scale, and then we had written the delineation, a 1 to 10 scale, on how good pot was, so that.
Oh yeah.
And so then pretty soon we delineated to buzz, mild high, very high, mild stoned, very stoned, and stoned.
All right.
And so what happened at that point was that the government picked up the book that I had written with Al Emanuel and had made it its world standard for some thousands and thousands for ongoing clinical studies. So everybody had to say, how good was the grass you just smoked? And these thousands of studies where they're actually smoking in 74, 75, 76, and they'd have to say a 6 or a 7 on my scale. Or and then they had to say, did you have a buzz or a mild high? And buzz, for instance, we had delineated as buzz, the first feeling you got from grass, that something was different inside you. Mild high, television was a shade clearer, and finally, when we got up to like very stoned, you could get lost walking in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You remember those?
Yeah.
And so one day I walked into the marijuana office in 1973 for the California Marijuana Initiative, which in 1972 had gotten 34% of the vote and actually made the ballot. And I walked in there, and I didn't know anything about marijuana other than this funny little book that my friend and I had thought we'd put together. And we met all these kids in there that knew all these esoteric information about cannabis that we did. You know, at first we got that marijuana made almost all the paper on earth. We couldn't get up the paper sign with the fiber and fuel sign, but hemp for paper, that almost all paper was made out of marijuana until about the middle or the end of the last century. Here's a book almost 200 years old, completely made out of pot. It's made. See, all paper was made from. All paper was. I know, but all paper was made from rags, and the predominant rag was hemp, marijuana. And this is so. This paper lasts for near ever. And in fact, if it was legal, its pulp would now make all of our paper. 1 acre of hemp equals 4 acres trees and makes every grade of paper. And also, these kids started telling me all the towels and diapers and all these other things. And I was just interested in getting high, but I thought that was an interesting idea. And this is 1973.
Yeah, is that when you first began your research?
Well, yeah, I started writing for them, and they told me things like, how could you not research when you find out this? I was 30, maybe 33 at this time, that canvas was the Dutch pronunciation of cannabis. That canvas sales, like in old Ironsides and all through the last century, that the word canvas meant cannabis, and canvas sales were cannabis sales. And canvas-covered wagons that went west were cannabis-covered wagons. Wow, what a trip. And then, all coming from this one plant. It was softer, warmer, longer lasting. It was an incredible plant. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. But I never realized how much it could go. It would just go and go and go. that this plant could make all the paper, fiber, fuel to make the food and protein for the whole earth, that it would be the #1 food to feed the earth's people and the earth's animals if it wasn't illegal, that's the best protein. Its seed oil almost exactly matches human blood plasma. No other seed oil on earth does. Birds live 10 to 20% longer if they have hemp seed in their diet, whether they're birds in the wild or birds in a cage. So I found out by 1973 and 4 when I found this information that our politicians, probably through complete ignorance, had made the whole system, all of our education, so ignorant that we have become lemmings. We were killing ourselves. The #1 plant for paper, fiber, and fuel from the natural cycle had been outlawed. That somehow the synthetic cycle had won, when the #1 thing in the natural cycle could outproduce it and completely clean up the atmosphere. So my partner, Captain Ed, who had become my partner in 1973 in doing the politics of this, said, we have to teach everybody in the world. So we went around and told everybody. It was a slow process. And as we did, we started to learn more about hemp. Okay. And that's how I got involved in the movement in 1973.
Now, in your 18-year walk in this path, I'm sure there's been a handful of people who have inspired you, or should I say march in this path, because you've been out there kicking it. You really have.
Yeah.
And there's been some people who have inspired you, I'm sure, and I'm also confident you've come across reliable resources. Where have you found what are your statistics to back up all the wonderful things that you're spouting out?
Well, all of them come from the Department of Agriculture, both the State Department of Agriculture of Kentucky and Wisconsin, who, by the way, April 5th of 1991 is holding a brand new meeting on this. Okay. I found this in the archives this was the actual minutes of the congressional testimony in 1937 and the senatorial testimony. All plastic was to be made out of pot. All paper was to be made out of marijuana. Bulletin 404, 1960. The whole bulletin is here reproduced. It was actually made on marijuana paper, on hemp paper, hemp pulp paper, the first hemp pulp paper in history.
So back then they were saying fiber, fuel, paper.
And then in 1937, they wrote an article that was published in 1938 called Popular Mechanics' New Billion-Dollar Problem. And this is exactly the way it appeared in Popular Mechanics in February of 1938. And what happened when this appeared is that it would make a new machine that brought the harvesting down from 300 hours to harvest and break an acre to less than an acre. It would make all the cellophane, it would make all the dynamite, 25,000 new products. First time the word billion had ever been used with an American agriculture crop.
First time?
First time it had ever been used with an American agriculture crop. And actually that everybody thought linen was made out of flax, but it actually says here in Popular Mechanics, echoing Britannica, that almost all linen was actually made from hemp, and that none but an expert could tell the difference. Here it says the paper industry offers even greater possibilities. An industry that amounts to over $1 billion a year. That's about 80 to 100 billion now. And of that, 80% is imported. But it says right here, but hemp will produce every grade of paper, and government figures estimate 10,000 acres devoted to hemp will produce as much acres as 40,000 acres of average pulp land. So the whole back of the book, what we took out is hundreds and hundreds of documents.
It's all your documents.
It's so that everything we say in the front half, there's 300-400 documents that over and over and over show and prove and prove and report. They're all government sources. So you don't have to believe me.
I was just curious.
It's just it's a matter of record.
Okay, now once you realized all this, and you started putting the parts together, this puzzle, and you got this whole picture, right?
Yeah.
What was your first impression, dude? What did you feel? Anger, rage, enthusiasm?
I wondered how a people could outlaw a natural thing. And I was one of the people that probably thought it was okay before I started smoking pot, so I wondered why I did it. And I realized I was ignorant, that they didn't teach us this in school. They didn't teach us that the flag, that the Betsy Ross and the flags were all made out of pot. They didn't tell us that the first and second draft of the Declaration of Independence was made out of pot. Maybe it was important. But, it's so important that when you start to tell them, they say children don't need to know, you begin to get suspect of the big corporations who run the museums and put out what they want to put out. Or maybe it's just that nobody wants the embarrassment of having admitted they didn't know anything. One of the technicians here, I just told her about hemp for paper, and canvas was the Dutch pronunciation of cannabis and all those. She said, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. And then another one did it. I didn't know that, I didn't know that. So that means ignorance. You can't get mad at ignorance. You can just get mad at the situation that creates ignorance, and in this case, the law, which I decided with my partner, Captain Ed, made me take a pledge to do until I was dead. It was legal in '84. Worked for the re-legalization of the #1 plant for paper, fiber, and fuel, and probably the healthiest thing a human being ever does. Along the way, I found out that hemp, when you smoke it, dilates your arteries, lowers your blood temperature, body temperature, lowers your ocular pressure, dilates your bronchioles better than anything else we have, and finally, it lowers your stress, the number one killer on earth. So here is the healthiest thing that statistic after statistic indicated you might even live longer if you smoke pot every day than if you do no drugs whatsoever, and you lived 8 to 24 years longer than people that used alcohol and tobacco. What kind of idiot would make somebody else be a lemming for some stupid law that politicians in their ignorance must have made up, because if they knew it, they'd be criminal working for pharmaceutical companies. Like George Bush used to do with Lilly, which was owned by Quail.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice?
Now, I know that you keep using the word hemp. The name of your organization's Hemp, stands for Health and Marijuana Prohibition. And hemp seems to be your favorite word. But in all honesty, isn't hemp marijuana? I mean, why aren't you using the word marijuana? Why do you keep using it and hammering it into people's minds as hemp when it's really marijuana?
Well, along the way, I began to read all this William Randolph Hearst yellow journalism, whether it was from him or from his newspaper editors or some conjunction.
But his yellow journalism, what do you mean?
Yellow journalism, Hearst, if you look up yellow journalism in the dictionary, it'll tell you William Randolph Hearst newspaper. It means when you do sensational, outrageous stories.
And he was doing that with?
Well, he was doing it with marijuana. He's had headlines, marijuana goads boys to bloodlust and murder in 30 days. Well, I've never seen anybody do anything on pot except get the munchies, So, I don't know. I mean, and they would say that marijuana turns man into a gunman, that axe murder smoked marijuana cigarette 4 days before.
Oh, kind of like that Reefer Madness
stuff.
Well,
and they used the word marijuana. When I look back, you know what the word marijuana comes from? The Mexican Sonoran colloquialism, slang, for intoxicant. It didn't even mean the flower of the hemp plant, since our politicians put out they call this marijuana, but actually it's the flower of the hemp plant, and the stalk, of course, is the hemp of the hemp plant, or from it comes the hemp of the hemp plant. But the word marijuana became known by the poor people, the Mexicans and blacks who smoked it along the border and in the southwest and around New Orleans. And they called it marijuana or reefer or grifa. And what happened was William Randolph Hearst never used the word hemp. Now, we had hundreds and hundreds of hemp medicines. It had been the number 1 and 2 and 3 medicine in America through most of the 1800s. But until 1863, it was the number 1 medicine we had in the United States for asthma, for muscular spasms. For tetanus, it was the only thing. When somebody got tetanus, we gave them huge, massive doses of hashish, or what they called hemp extractums or cannabis extractums, and we give them so much that they get more in a day or two than you and I have done in our life.
Wow, pay to get sick.
And wait a second, no, I don't think so. These guys didn't like it, but for 9 days while they had the tetanus, which is feces in the blood basically, and before the toxins could pass through the liver, and you got the lockjaw. And the only thing that could keep your muscles soft enough so you didn't die from this and to allow the toxins to pass was to take huge, massive doses of hashish.
Wow.
And nobody ever died from it. In fact, I want to repeat that. There's never been a single death from marijuana cancer.
Not one?
None that we know of, except at the hands of police. I mean, there probably is some car accidents, but it's well known that people do seem to drive a lot safer. They've done study after study after study, from car and driver to the University of Washington, and that they found out that people actually drive a little safer as far as getting home than even people that are straight. They just miss their freeway exits more often. But when you're straight and you miss your freeway exits, you go, wow. But when you're stoned, you go...
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.
How would you like to have all the best cannabis info all in one place? Canafo.com is the Google, Facebook, and Craigslist of cannabis. It even has its own social media platform. Canafo.com puts the world of medicinal and recreational cannabis in one place for consumers, businesses, and growers. Canafo.com is a free service where you can find over 9,000 different strains of cannabis, shop cannabis classifieds, and much more. Canafo.com is the world's most comprehensive source for all things cannabis. Get in the know with Canafo.
Have you visited timeforhemp.com? We're doing something special you'll love to see. We're presenting a live stream of multiple cannabis gardens around the clock in high definition. Come see it now. Lots of people talk about growing cannabis. We do it. Join our growing audience to get inspired by our crops to learn how to cultivate yours. Because at Time for Hemp, we plant seeds of wisdom so we can harvest buds of truth.
Despite the legal trend against marijuana, many Americans continue to buck the trend. Some pro-marijuana organizations, in fact, tell us that marijuana, also known as hemp, could, as a raw material, save the U.S. economy. That's some statement. Not by smoking it. That's a minor issue. Would you believe that marijuana could replace most oil and energy needs? That marijuana could revolutionize the textile industry and stop foreign imports? Those are the claims. Some people think marijuana, or hemp, may be the epitome of Yankee ingenuity. Mr. Jack Harrer, for example, is the national director and founder of an organization called Hemp. It's an acronym for Help End Marijuana Prohibition. Mr. Harrer is the author of a remarkable little book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, wherein, not surprisingly, Mr. Harrer urges the repeal of marijuana prohibition. Mr. Harrer is not alone. Throughout the war on drugs, several organizations have consistently urged the legalization of marijuana. High Times Magazine, for example, the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, or NORML for short, and an organization called BAC, the Business Alliance for Commerce in Hemp. But the reasons the pro-marijuana lobby want marijuana legal has little to do with getting high, and a great deal to do with fighting oil giants like Exxon and Iran. The pro-marijuana groups claim that hemp is such a versatile raw material that its products not only compete with petroleum, but with coal, natural gas, nuclear energy, pharmaceutical, timber, and textile companies. It is estimated that methane and methanol production alone from hemp grown as biomass could replace 90% of the world's energy needs. If they are right, this is not good news for oil interests and could account for the continuation of marijuana prohibition. The claim is that the threat hemp posed to natural resource companies back in the 30s accounts for its original ban. At one time, marijuana seemed to have a promising future as a cornerstone of industry. When Rudolf Diesel produced his famous engine in 1896, he assumed that the diesel engine would be powered by a variety of fuels, especially vegetable and seed oils. Rudolf Diesel, like most engineers then, believed vegetable fuels were superior to petroleum. Hemp is the most efficient vegetable. In the 1930s, the Ford Motor Company also saw a future in biomass fuels. Ford operated a successful biomass conversion plant that included hemp at their Iron Mountain facility in Michigan. Ford engineers extracted methanol, charcoal fuel, tar, pitch, ethyl acetate, and creosote, all fundamental ingredients for modern industry and now supplied by oil-related industries. The difference is that the vegetable source is renewable, cheap, and clean, and the petroleum or coal sources are limited, expensive, and dirty. By volume, 30% of the hemp seed contains oil suitable for high-grade diesel fuel, as well as aircraft engine and precision machine oil. Henry Ford's experiments with methanol promised cheap, readily renewable fuel, and if you think methanol means compromise, you should know that many modern race cars run on methanol. About the time Ford was making biomass methanol, a mechanical device to strip the outer fibers of the hemp plant appeared on the market. These machines could turn hemp into paper and fabrics quickly and cheaply. Hemp paper is superior to wood paper. The first two drafts of the U.S. Constitution were written on hemp paper, and the final draft is on animal skin. Hemp paper contains no dioxin or other toxic residue, and a single acre of hemp can produce the same amount of paper as 4 acres of trees. The trees take 20 years to harvest, and hemp takes a single season. In warm climates, hemp can be harvested 2, even 3 times a year. It also grows in bad soil and restores the nutrients. Hemp fiber stripping machines were bad news to the Hearst Paper Manufacturing Division and a host of other natural resource firms. Coincidentally, the DuPont Chemical Company had in 1937 been granted a patent on a sulfuric acid process to make paper from wood pulp. At the time, DuPont predicted their sulfuric acid process would account for 80% of their business for the next 50 years. Hemp, once the mainstay of American agriculture, became a threat to a handful of corporate giants. To stifle the commercial threat that hemp posed to timber interests, William Randolph Hearst began referring to hemp in his newspapers by its Spanish name, marijuana. This did two things. It associated the plant with Mexicans and played on racist fears, and it misled the public into thinking that marijuana and hemp were different plants. Nobody was afraid of hemp. It had been cultivated and processed into usable goods and consumed as medicine and burned in oil lamps for hundreds of years. But after a campaign to discredit hemp in the Hearst newspapers, Americans became afraid of something called marijuana. By 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, which marked the beginning of the end of the hemp industry. In 1938, Popular Mechanics ran an article about marijuana called New Billion-Dollar Crop. It was the first time the words billion-dollar were used to describe a U.S. agricultural product. Popular Mechanics said, and I'm quoting, "A machine has been invented which solves a problem more than 6,000 years old. The machine is designed to remove the fiber-bearing cortex from the rest of the stalk, making hemp fiber available for use without a prohibitive amount of human labor. Hemp is the standard fiber of the world. It has great tensile strength and durability. It is used to produce more than 5,000 textile products, ranging from rope to fine laces. And the woody herds remaining after the fiber has been removed contain more than 77% cellulose and can be used to produce more than 25,000 products ranging from dynamite to cellophane." End of quote. Well, since the Popular Mechanics article appeared over half a century ago, many more applications have come to light. But back in 1935, more than 58,000 tons of marijuana seed were used just to make paint and varnish, all non-toxic, by the way. When marijuana was banned, these safe paints and varnishes were replaced by paints made with toxic petrochemicals. In the 1930s, no one knew about poisoned rivers or deadly landfills or children dying from chemicals in house paint. People did know something about hemp back then because the plant and its products were so common. All ships' lines were made from hemp, and much of the sail canvas. In fact, the word canvas is the Dutch pronunciation of the Greek word for hemp, cannabis. All ropes, hawsers, and lines aboard ship, all rigging, nets, flags, and pennants were also made from marijuana stalks, and so were all charts, logs, and Bibles. Today, many of these items are made in whole or in part with synthetic petrochemicals and wood. All oil lamps used to burn hemp seed oil until the whale oil edged it out of first place in the mid-19th century. And then, when all the whales were dead, lamp lights were fueled by petroleum and coal and recently radioactive energy. This may be hard to believe in the middle of a war on drugs, but the first law concerning marijuana in the colonies at Jamestown in 1619 ordered farmers to grow Indian hemp. Massachusetts passed a compulsory grow law in 1631. Connecticut followed in 1632. The Chesapeake colonies ordered their farmers by law to grow marijuana in the mid-18th century. Names like Hempstead or Hemp Hill dot the American landscape and reflect areas of intense marijuana cultivation. During World War II, domestic hemp production became crucial when the Japanese cut off Asian supplies to the U.S. American farmers, and even their sons who grew marijuana, were exempt from military duty during World War II. A 1942 U.S. Department of Agriculture film called Hemp for Victory extolled the agricultural might of marijuana and called for hundreds of thousands of acres to be planted. Despite a rather vigorous drug crackdown, 4-H clubs were asked by the government to grow marijuana for seed supply. Ironically, war plunged the government into a sober reality about marijuana, and that is that it's very valuable. In today's anti-drug climate, people don't want to hear about the commercial potential of marijuana. The reason is that the flowering top of a female hemp plant contains a drug. But from 1842 through the 1890s, a powerful concentrated extract of marijuana was the second most prescribed drug in the United States. In all that time, the medical literature didn't list any of the ill effects claimed by today's drug warriors. Today, there are anywhere from 25 to 30 million Americans who smoke marijuana regularly. As an industry, marijuana clears well more than $4 billion a year. Obviously, as an illegal business, none of that money goes to taxes. But the modern marijuana trade only sells one product, a drug. Hemp could be worth considerably more than $4 billion a year if it were legally supplying the 50,000 safe products that proponents claim it can. If hemp could supply the energy needs of the United States, its value would be inestimable. Now that the drug czar is in final retreat, America has an opportunity to, once and for all, say farewell to the Exxon Valdez and a prohibitively expensive brinkmanship in the desert sands of Saudi Arabia. This is Hugh Downs, ABC News, New York.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.
Indigrow is your source for affordable induction grow lighting. First discovered in 1891 by Nikola Tesla, Indigrow lights deliver 11 years of electronic sunlight to your plants. Indigrow lamps require less than half the power of traditional HID lamps. Converting to Indigrow lights means you'll cut down on your power bill with less lighting. Indigrow lamps also use 5 times less mercury than traditional fluorescent or HID lamps, making Indigrow not only energy efficient but environmentally friendly as well. No more switching out lamps between vegetative and flowering stages. As nature intended, your lights get a steady dose of UV light. That makes your plants grow healthier and stronger. Indigrow products are manufactured in San Diego, California, and come with a written 10-year warranty. What Tesla knew, then growers know now, is that Indigrow lighting is the cost-effective addition to your victory garden. To learn more or order now, go to inda-grow.com. That's INDA-GRO.com, or call 877-452-2244 to answer any of your questions. These guys really know lights. Indigrow really is your sunlight in a box.
It's kind of a Wild West.
It's more than it. And the problem of the green rush is that it brings many more people. And partly the problem is that these new people don't necessarily know what they're dealing with here. They see a rainforest.
You used the phrase the green rush.
Yeah.
It's connected to the gold rush of the 19th century. You call it the green rush, the marijuana rush.
And, you know, the gold rush built California. But what a lot of people don't remember is that the gold rush also destroyed a lot of California's natural beauty and its original richness. So when we talk about the green rush, we're trying to evoke those memories both of the frenzy of activity that came with the gold rush, but also those impacts, those cumulative impacts that linger with us today, and are concerned that if we don't somehow get our arms around this boom, we're going to be left with a bust.
The need or desire for marijuana at a national level is beyond anybody's expectations because society has put a stamp of approval on it. But what society hasn't thought about is where does their marijuana come from? Is it grown in a way that is environmentally safe? Is it grown in a way that's not damaging the land? And the answer to that is absolutely not.
And the environmental damage is striking. This video, made by a Humboldt State University professor, uses satellite images from Google Earth to expose over 600 illegal marijuana grows in Humboldt County, just north of Mendocino. Each red dot represents an industrial-scale marijuana farm, and each blue line a tributary. Here is an area in 2010. And here it is today, deforested by an illegal marijuana farm. And each one of those illegal farms is using thousands of gallons of water. Water the state just doesn't have to spare. Pot farmers often pump water through makeshift irrigation systems, and they routinely use massive amounts of fertilizers and some pesticides so powerful that they are banned in this country.
You can see how wet the soil is. Look, I mean, they've been watering all day, all summer. And so if that gets 5 gallons a day, that's the reason we have two towns in our county where there's building moratoriums. You're not allowed to buy a building permit and build a house because we're running out of water. But because we have greedy people here who are using the water for illegal marijuana, this is not medical. There's nothing medical about this grow.
Back in Humboldt County, we wanted to see how easy it would be to spot the illegal pot farms from the air.
When you get up in the air like this, you see how impossible it really is for law enforcement to police this whole area all the time.
And not long after we launched, there they were, everywhere. Brazenly open industrial-scale marijuana farms. We even found an illegal operation unabashedly drilling a well for their own water supply.
How did we get into this situation?
Good question.
I mean, it seems, when you look at it from a broad perspective, ridiculous.
Well, I completely agree, especially when we went through the experience of Prohibition and when there are so many direct parallels. And if you could go back in time and fly over the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee or Kentucky, I think you'd see something analogous. You've got a failed Prohibition policy that was driving lawless, violent, destructive situations. In the 1920s, you've got the exact same thing happening today with marijuana.
Have you visited timeforhemp.com? We're doing something special you'll love to see. We're presenting a live stream of multiple cannabis gardens around the clock in high definition. Come see it now. Lots of people talk about growing cannabis. We do it. Join our growing audience to get inspired by our crops to learn how to cultivate yours. Because at Time for Hemp, we plant seeds of wisdom so we can harvest buds of truth.
At Crop King Seeds, we sell the finest marijuana seeds in the world, including White Widow, Blueberry, Purple Kush, Haze Extreme, and so many more. Our seeds are available for direct order with speedy shipping. Crop King Seeds are also sold in over 100 locations worldwide.
Excuse me, I'm looking to buy some Crop King seeds.
Look no further, my friend.
Wow, they're here and in so many strains.
Buy your seeds now, in-store or online at CropKingSeeds.com.
One thing you can say for America's war on drugs, it makes great television. Yet all the heroin America consumes in a year can be grown on just 50 square miles, almost anywhere on Earth. And that full year's supply can fit in one single cargo plane. For every kilogram of drugs intercepted at our borders, it's estimated that at least 9 kilograms get through.
Police! Police, open up!
On March 25, 1994, Boston police, executing a no-knock drug warrant, burst in on an elderly black minister, wrestled him to the floor, and handcuffed him. 5 minutes later, he died of a heart attack. No drugs were found. Police said an informant had given them bad information. In 1914, America declared war on drugs, passing this nation's first law against narcotics. We'll be looking at some disturbing reports from the battlefronts of that war. We'll total up some startling figures on its cost to the American taxpayer and to the American way of life. We'll report on its successes and its far more frequent failures. We'll ask whether this war is being won, whether indeed it can ever be won as it is now being conducted. And then we'll look at some alternatives cropping up here and there across the land that suggest if we can't win this war, perhaps we can find ways to peace. That's the subject of tonight's Cronkite Report, The Drug Dilemma, War or Peace. Federal expenditures, our tax monies, have shot up from $1.5 billion a year to almost 10 times that, almost $15 billion. It's estimated that over those same 10 years, federal, state, and local governments together have spent $150 billion of our dollars fighting drugs. As Americans, we've not only the right, but the duty to ask, is that money well spent? So our first estimate is a startling one. Of the 260 million Americans now alive, 77 million of us, almost a third, have tried drugs at least once in our lifetimes. And the government estimates that almost 40 million Americans continue to use drugs right now, today, at least once a year. America has the highest rate of drug use per capita in the industrialized world. There's at least some good news. Casual drug use, that's Americans who use narcotics irregularly, every few weeks or so, largely white, middle and upper class cocaine users, has dropped steadily since 1985. But the hardcore of America's drug abusers, some 2.7 million people who use illicit drugs more than once a week, has remained undiminished year in, year out. For a while, it looked as if our children were giving us some good news. Use of illicit drugs by high school students trended steadily down from 1985 to 1991. It looked like victory in perhaps the most crucial battle of all. But no more. In 1992, that trend suddenly reversed. Today, war or no war, drug use in the schools is going back up. And our children say they're less and less convinced of the dangers of drugs. What do we do now? Redouble our efforts? Pour ever more billions into the war we've been fighting? Get tougher still? Build more prisons? Before we decide, we need to know one more fact. Today, almost 1.5 million Americans are already serving time in federal, state, and local prisons, mostly for drug offenses. That's one American in every 180 behind bars, the second highest imprisonment rate in the world. Only Russia holds a larger proportion of its people in prison. Most of our states now put more new funds into prisons than into educating our children. And because of the war on drugs, some of our children are now getting a very different kind of education.
Here we go.
The outing starts Saturday morning as the children clamber into the van in Queens, New York.
Just sit anywhere. No.
The van crosses the bridge to Manhattan. The children doze along the leafy roads of prosperous Westchester County until they reach a place with the pleasant name of Bedford Hills. Bedford Hills is New York State's maximum security prison for women. Sister Elaine and Sister Tisa have brought the children to visit their mothers.
We have two in the back, Tisa.
Well, oh, I forgot about them.
Now put your name there.
Half the women imprisoned at Bedford Hills have committed violent crimes, up to and including murder. Many of the rest are serving sentences of 15 years to life for possession or sale of drugs. 15 years without parole suggests that this prison must hold some major drug kingpins. Well, meet the kingpins.
People think that if somebody had 15 years to life, then they must be big, terrible criminals. And that isn't true. We find these little people, and we get them caught up in a system that just puts them away for half of their life.
Elaine Lord is superintendent of Bedford Hills. She has a national reputation as a tough, humane prison warden. Under Governor Nelson Rockefeller, New York State pioneered draconian drug laws. Getting caught with, or even close to, a few ounces of cocaine or heroin meant you could serve a minimum 15 years, even if you had no record of violence, even if you had children. With the war on drugs, women have become the fastest growing part of our prison population. So I visited Bedford Hills to find out what kind of women were in here and what their long imprisonment was costing them and their children and us. Judy Perez's 12-year-old daughter, Delilah, was one of the children who rode up in the van that morning.
Growing up in a foster care home, you know, they're like, oh, God, why can't I be with Mommy? And it's been hard for her. You know, I've been talking to her throughout the years and telling her that, you know, we have to keep strong and, you know, maybe next year would be a better year. So she feels, you know, like, when is this going to be all over with? When are we going to live together?
Judy Perez, an admitted heroin user, told us she is here because she and a boyfriend were visiting an apartment when police broke in and found just under 5 ounces of heroin. Today, Judy is lucky Delilah came. Jan Warren's daughter did not.
I was 35 years old when I came here, and I'll be 50 when I leave. My daughter was 15 when I came in, and she went to her father to live, which was on the other side of the country. As a result, we haven't been able to visit very often at all, maybe 5 times in the 8 years I've been here. It caused her to grow up, I think, hating what happened to me, but hurting so much that she's made some bad decisions in her life. Getting very close to, following in Mom's footsteps as far as ending up behind bars.
Jan Warren says she's here because she thought it would be good to make $2,000 transporting cocaine to her cousin in Rochester. It was not. Bedford Hills, under Elaine Lord, is considered an enlightened institution. Women undergo drug treatment. They can and do earn high school and even college degrees. And then they wait down the irreducible years.
I feel that I could be out, have a job, and establish my life. Because I have my bachelor's, I have a certificate in gerontology, and I'm just sitting here.
Loretta Evans says she was standing on a Harlem street corner with her daughter and the family she babysat for when police staged an outdoor drug sweep. She had no drugs on her, but the other family did. Prison costs vary in America. They range from about $20,000 to $50,000 per prisoner per year. At Bedford Hills, the cost is $30,000 a year. Here's the arithmetic.
I've been here 9 years.
Out of a sentence of?
15 years to life.
9 years at $30,000 per year equals $270,000.
I'm not eligible for parole till the year 2001.
6 more years at $30,000 comes to $180,000. Judy Perez's minimum cost to the taxpayers of New York State, if she gets paroled as soon as she becomes eligible, $450,000.
I served 7 years and 8 months of a 15 to life sentence.
Jan Warren has cost taxpayers about $225,000 to date, with another $225,000 to go.
I'm here 11 years out of a 15-year sentence.
The cost to date for Loretta Evans, $330,000, with a minimum still to pay of $120,000. The total cost to New York State taxpayers of keeping Judy Perez, Jan Warren, and Loretta Evans here for their minimum mandatory sentences, 3 times $450,000, $1,350,000, plus another cost that must be measured in generations. Children who may follow in the footsteps of their imprisoned mothers.
Because what they feel is that society has taken away their mother, and sometimes for the entire time that they're growing up, and they don't understand that. They don't understand how we could see their mother as being so terrible that she can't walk the street for 15 years.
After the Rockefeller mandatory drug sentences took effect in New York State, the United States Congress got tough on drugs with its own mandatory minimums. When New York State and then the Congress enacted the harsh mandatory sentencing laws we now live with, there were 2 reasons. Legislators thought judges were being soft on drug criminals, but they also wanted to give prosecutors a tool to catch drug kingpins. The only way to reduce a mandatory sentence is to turn in other drug criminals. So, the theory said, street dealers would turn in suppliers, suppliers would turn in wholesalers, all the way to the top. A few drug kingpins have been caught, but to a disturbing extent, mandatory sentencing has been working in reverse, filling our prisons with the lowest level, least dangerous people on the drug scene. Here's how. Perhaps you remember a remarkable tale of 2 crimes from NBC's Dateline 2 years ago. The first crime. Jeff Thompson, a small-time LSD dealer, and his 18-year-old girlfriend, Nicole Richardson, were caught by drug agents. Nicole herself hadn't sold drugs. The jury convicted her primarily of putting another drug dealer, who had become a government informant, in touch with Jeff over the telephone. What the jurors didn't know was that conviction carried a congressionally mandated prison term.
10 years for a phone call, I just don't see it.
The second crime. This is Nicole with her mother, Angela. One night, while in jail, Nicole was on the phone with Angela. A drifter broke into the house, and as Nicole listened, attacked Angela.
He says, I'm going to rape you, and then I'm going to kill you.
Nicole's screams brought guards who sent the police. John Dwayne Yarbrough was caught in the act, convicted in state court of sodomy and attempted rape. He will be eligible for parole in 1997. Nicole Richardson, with no record of violence, no criminal record at all, will be here at this federal prison camp until the year 2000. We met Nicole again in April as she was graduating with honors from a prison drug awareness program. She says her life here hasn't all been bad.
I think being in a place like this, it wakes you up and you see that the things that you didn't really appreciate on the outside are so important to you now. I want to be somebody, and I want to feel good about myself.
All the other members of Jeff Thompson's LSD ring are back on the streets. They all informed on each other and received shortened sentences. Only Nicole, with no one to inform on, remains behind bars.
It still makes me angry. I accept what's happened to me as it happened for a reason, but I'm very bitter about that. Still.
Nicole saves the government a little money working as a clerk for the prison. By the time she leaves here, we will have spent more than $170,000 to keep her locked away. There are tens of thousands of Nicole Richardsons in our federal prisons, nonviolent drug criminals doing mandatory sentences of 10, 20, 30 years with no chance of parole.
I've been in a couple of years, and I accept it more now than anything. My mom always talks about when she wants to bring her baby home, but I always tell her, well, in the year 2000 we'll talk about it. There's no sense in hoping. If it happens, I'll be really surprised, but if it doesn't, I'm going to be okay.
As you've seen, we can put dollars and cents price tags on the war on drugs. But is there another price, a cost to what we think of as the American way of life? A growing number of judges and civil liberties lawyers think there is.
It's probably the most destructive social experiment that this country's ever undertaken.
Stephen Duke is a professor of criminal law at Yale. His book, America's Longest War, is a major study of the war on drugs.
It's destroying the cities, it's creating crime, it's making public education in the cities impossible, it's filling our prisons. It is doing nobody any good.
You have said that the courts have set aside the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments to the Constitution. What do you mean by that?
Anything is reasonable if it's done to find drugs or to enforce the drug laws. The drug agents can stop virtually anybody on the street, stop their cars, search their cars. There are so many exceptions to the search warrant requirement, it's becoming a joke. Our rights of property have virtually vanished where they can be linked in some way with drugs. If drugs are found in your house or your car, you can lose your car or your house, even if you had no knowledge of those drugs. You have to prove your innocence.
Well, how do we enforce the drug laws and not restrict our liberties in the examples you've given?
You can't treat drug use like rape or murder. That's crazy. It's just insane, and that's what we've been doing.
On this question of civil liberties, there are those who make the point that civil liberties should be equally available to all, and that those who peddle drugs are interfering severely with the civil rights of law-abiding citizens. A central purpose of the war on drugs was to safeguard all of us from the growing violence of street crime. Yet since 1985, drug-related murder and violence have trended steadily upward. Every year since 1986, more than 20,000 Americans have been murdered. Enforcement, aimed overwhelmingly at reducing the supply of drugs, is not protecting us. Well, what about this? Can we perhaps separate the violent professional drug sellers from the usually non-violent mass of drug users? Then, instead of imprisoning enormous numbers of users, can we treat them, get them off drugs, and so decrease America's demand for illegal narcotics? We found one answer in Brooklyn. Every morning at the Brooklyn Criminal Court, this is the scene. An endless line shuffling toward the security gates. They've come to see friends and loved ones tried, usually convicted, often sent to prison for long years, most of them on charges involving drugs. But every now and then, upstairs in Judge Rose McBrien's court, someone gets a second chance. 2 years ago, Eladio Freitas was caught selling drugs, but because he had no history of violence, the Brooklyn DA offered him a remarkable choice. He could take his chances with a jury, or he could go into a tough 2-year-long drug treatment program. If Eladio stayed the course, he'd come out drug-free, with a job, a new place to live, and all charges dropped. If he didn't complete the program, he'd go to prison under a long, mandatory sentence. The choice is called DTAP, the Drug Treatment Alternative to Prison.
This is not a slap-on-the-wrist program. This is a tough program. These people go in there for 2 years.
Every day, I had to hustle up money to get drugs, crack.
Dino Offer is one of DTAP's first graduates. When police busted him in 1990, he was a homeless junkie. Today, 3 years out of DTAP, he works 2 jobs, pays taxes, is reconciled with his family.
There's no rehabilitation in jail. You know, the drug treatment alternative to jail is the only program that offers rehabilitation in the whole criminal justice system.
To slap people in jail whose only crime is their sickness, is their addiction, makes no sense whatsoever.
DA Charles Hines and his deputy, Susan Powers, created DTAP. They cite 2 dramatic sets of figures to prove its success. First, the price tag.
If you want to round it off, it's $44,000 to put someone in state prison for the first year, as opposed to $18,000 for DTAP.
Statewide, 40% of New York drug criminals released from prison are rearrested within 2 years. For DTAP graduates, the comparable rearrest rate is just 16%.
The reason this country has not expanded drug treatment alternatives as fast as I'd like to see it done is because of the concern of political leadership, that the public would much rather hear a jail-only solution. And they're right, but they're giving them the wrong message. And what I'm suggesting is when I give the message, as clearly as I try to do, that you've had your pockets picked for all these years, and safety is something that continues to diminish, then you've got to look for an alternative. And we have the alternative, and it works.
And that brings us to the next question. Does drug treatment work? Is it worth what it costs? Or is it, as many Americans believe, pretty much of a boondoggle? For the answer, we went to one of the nation's most successful treatment programs. It's called Amity, a therapeutic community nestled in the mountains of Arizona. It's the same kind of treatment facility DTAP uses, but Amity is unique. Amity is one of the few drug treatment centers in America that takes mothers and their children. In their months or years at therapeutic communities, former addicts work, earn diplomas, learn trades. It costs about $17,000 a year to treat an addict at Amity. Deputy Director Nadia Arbiter, herself once an addict and drug smuggler, says it's money well spent.
You have to look at the costs of welfare and food stamps and child protective service workers and probation officers and parole officers and times in jail and booking costs and health care costs and on and on and on and on. And one woman can end up in her career of addiction costing actual tax-paying dollars, maybe $1 million. For that $1 million, you could clean up 50 to 60 women and their children.
A study by the RAND Corporation last year found that just $1 invested in treatment can reduce drug use as much as with $7 invested in enforcement and punishment. Nevertheless, America's drug policy remains overwhelmingly punishment-oriented. The concept of harm reduction says this: some people always have used drugs, and probably some people always will. The object now is to try to reduce the harm that those drugs do, both to the people who use them and to the rest of us. In the era of AIDS, harm reduction takes on new urgency. In America today, almost half the new HIV infections trace directly to contaminated needles. So harm reduction means AIDS reductions.
The epidemic is going to spread. The epidemic will not retard itself because we ignore it. It will spread because, in fact, we do ignore it.
And of course, just because something is illegal doesn't mean it doesn't happen. A lot of people are comparing America's war on drugs to our disastrous experience in Vietnam. You may remember that a Vermont senator offered this solution to the Vietnam War: let's declare victory and go home. A similar solution is being offered for the war on drugs. What if we legalize them? Make them as freely available as alcohol or tobacco. Let anyone who wants to use drugs use them. Simply repeal America's war on drugs. This is a solution we can't show you because it doesn't exist. America has one historical guideline. In 1919, the Constitution was amended to prohibit any sale of intoxicating liquor. There are few good figures on what happened to alcohol use during and after Prohibition. But one authoritative study shows this pattern. At first, liquor consumption dropped off immediately and dramatically to just a third of what it had been. But over the next few years, it bounced back up to two-thirds the pre-Prohibition levels. The study indicates that alcohol use did not surge immediately after repeal, but gradually drifted back up to about where it was when Prohibition began. So about all we can offer about legalization of drugs is the history of Prohibition and some informed opinions. Robert Sweet is a senior federal judge in New York. He's watched with growing dismay the impact of the drug war on American society and on the kind of justice he must mete out. Judge Sweet would legalize the use of drugs.
It's the use of mind-altering drugs, mind-altering substances that ought to be controlled, that ought to be dealt with as a health problem. But to try to stop it by criminal law is, one, obviously unsuccessful, and two, is wrong in the sense that the government should not be in the business of telling people what they can put, what they can eat, what they can put in their bodies.
Just about every American was shocked when Robert McNamara, one of the master architects of the Vietnam War, acknowledged that not only did he believe the war wrong, terribly wrong, but that he thought so at the very time he was helping to wage it. That's a mistake we must not make. It's surely time for this nation to stop flying blind, stop accepting the assurances of politicians and other officials that if only we keep doing what we're doing, add a little more cash, break down a few more doors, lock up a few more Jan Warrens and Nicole Richardsons, then we will see the light at the end of the tunnel. Victory will be ours. Tonight we've seen a war that in its broad outline is not working. We've raised more questions than we've answered, because that's where the drug war stands today. We're a confused people desperately in need of answers and leadership. Legalization seems to many like too dangerous an experiment. To others, the war on drugs as is now conducted seems inhumane and too costly. Is there a middle ground? Appoint a bipartisan commission of distinguished citizens, a blue ribbon panel to reappraise our drug policy right down to its very core, a commission with full investigative authority and the prestige and power to override bureaucratic concerns and political considerations. Such a commission could help us focus our thinking, escape the cliches of the drug war in favor of scientific fact, more rationally analyze the real scope of the problem, answer the questions that bedevil us, and present a comprehensive drug policy for the future. We cannot go into tomorrow with the same formulas that are failing today. We must not blindly add to the body count and the terrible cost of the war on drugs, only to learn from another Robert McNamara 30 years from now that what we've been doing is wrong, terribly wrong. Good night.
Free? Did you say free? Free hemp? Free hemp? Free hemp video and audio? Free downloads of all the top artists, all the pot artists, on planet Earth. Interviews with all the people making the movement, making the hemp movement. It's time for hemp. That's right, world. It's time for hemp. That's right, world. It's time for hemp.